Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode number 17 of the Blossoming Into You show. My name is Mika Lau, and I'll be your host today. Along with me, joining us, we have Emily Henderson tuning in all the way from Portland, Oregon. And today's episode, we're going to be diving deep into talking about sexual uniqueness and radical acceptance. So, juicy topic. And Emily, welcome. Super excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really, really excited to be here as well. I am an intimacy and empowerment coach, so I really feel very strongly about the two pillars of empowering oneself as well as exploring and kind of finding your unique sexuality. So I'm excited to talk about these topics today.
Yeah, I think it's such an important topic, and as my audience that have been tuning in to my episodes, and if this is your first time listening, then my intention and my vision was to create a safe, supportive, nurturing space for women all across the globe to be able to blossom,
Mm.
sexually, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever that looks like for you. And by us having conversations like this in the public and really creating space to talk about things like that, it's important. We get to give other
Mm.
women, like, serve as a permission to inspire, to empower others to also have conversations like this and have fun with it. So with that being said, Emily, tell us a little bit more about you, your background. How did you get into the work that you do today, and how
Mm.
did you get to where you're at?
Yeah. Well, kind of off camera, we were talking a little bit. I did ballet for 20 years. I did the sign up for dance classes when you're little because I was dancing all over the house, and then went to college for a BFA in ballet performance. And then around age 24, I had been like injured year after year, and I finally decided to take a year off, which is when I came into yoga. I started practicing yin yoga and meditation, and I ended up studying in India for a month to become a yoga teacher. And that's when I really dove into deeper philosophy and meditation. I love the asana because of ballet. I like was very cozy in the different poses, but learning what the poses meant and where they came from and the different ways of using the mind and the body together were really, really enlightening for me. And then I moved to Austin, Texas. I was teaching yoga there full time, which is actually really hard because it's driving all over the city. And as I was teaching, I knew that there was this part of me that was feeling still really uncomfortable in my sexuality. I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't know how to ask for what I wanted. I I got into that space of feeling, okay, well, maybe me and my partner aren't having sex that much, and that's just kind of like how it goes. And
Mhm.
maybe I just feel uncomfortable in my sexuality, but that's normal. Sex is taboo. Like, it's just, I got into that space of like, this is just how it is, and this is how it's going to be. And
Mhm.
then I started kind of opening up to my friends about it. And the more I opened up, the more I heard that other people were feeling the same way. And even though I had that mindset of this is how it is, the more I heard people saying this, I was like, no, we can do something about this. Something has to be different. And it was pretty wild because within a couple months, I was then just introduced to this group of tantra practitioners.
Mhm.
And about 2 years ago, I started practicing Tantra. And when I found Tantra, it was kind of blending the world of spirituality, the world of using my body, and now my sexuality, and like these three different pillars for me. And when I started Tantra, I was like, this is what I want to be doing. I want to spread this with the world. And I coach from a lens of really like mindfulness, spirituality, sexuality, and self. And I'm pretty new to Tantra, so I don't, kind of like Layla and our teacher that we have in common, I would say I have like a tantric approach, but I'm not teaching tantra specifically because I'm so
Mhm.
new to it, and I really want to honor that practice.
Mhm.
So now I'm here. I'm an intimacy and empowerment coach. I started my business this past year, and it's been going really well. I've had a lot of success with the clients that I've worked with. I personally work with women and non-binary individuals,
Mhm.
and I I'm really happy to be here. I think that's everything.
Oh, how fun. Thank you for sharing that. And I just love every time I have a guest to come on and we share so many similarities. And there's I'm not, no surprises there because I believe in the law of attraction. We magnetize the people that are on very similar paths as us. And I also did ballet, like we mentioned before we came on camera. And I always remember like I did ballet in college, and that was the time and the space where I felt so much like it was like my bubble of sanctuary. Anytime when I
Mm,
was on the in the studio, when I listening to the classical music, the live music, and I just feel like I'm in the zone. I feel like I'm totally out of my head, and it feels so amazing. And you can imagine I went to UC Berkeley, so like in the
mm,
rigorous academia, like in the intellectual, like when I'm not doing ballet, I was so much in my head, so much in the intellectual mind. But when
mhm,
I was dancing, like that's when I get to build this relationship with my body. I didn't understand it back then, but now the more I build this connection and this relationship with my body, the more I understand like, wow, that's why I felt so blissful, so amazing in my
mm,
body whenever I was dancing. And also like now linking that our connection to our body and our connection to spirit, I'm just seeing so much like how it merges together and how important
mm.
it is. But I do want us to go into the direction of sexuality. Obviously that's the topic of our conversation
Mm.
today. And thanks for being so vulnerable and sharing with us, like, you know, in your past when you experienced some
Oh yeah.
challenges with your partner, how bizarre it is that we normalize things like that. We normalize like not experiencing pleasure and think that that's okay, that's the way it is. And I'm sure like a lot of women or non-binary individuals tuning in, they probably feel the same way listening right now. So Emily, speak into that. Like, what was your journey like when you know, like, hey, that's not normal, and the steps
Mm.
that you took to break free from this idea, this normal
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that it's it's kind of it's hard because it's like I don't want to normalize that pleasure and feeling uncomfortable in your sexuality is normal, but it totally is because I think it's such a taboo thing that our patriarchal system has just ingrained in us as pleasures for someone else, especially as women and non-binary. It's a performance. It's really not about you. So we get in this idea of, okay, if it's not about me, then like it's not that my needs are not that important. And it obviously depends on how you were raised, but if you're in the Western society, you've had bits of it at least in your experience. So honestly, for me, what was so hard, it was beautiful to hear about your experience in ballet. I felt so similarly. I felt when I was moving my body, I was so in my body, but the second I stood still, I was so uncomfortable in my body. I didn't have the traditional tall, lean ballerina body. I was always the one who was like a little overweight in ballet terms. I'm going to say that
Me
for
too.
everyone listening. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Not like in the world terms, well, kind of in our society, but I always felt so uncomfortable in my body, and it wasn't until honestly, um, maybe this year that I was finally like, "Oh, I hated my body." I truly every morning it was like I set this cassette tape in, and it was just a loop of like, "You're not enough, you're fat,
Mhm,
you're like, look at your
mhm,
stomach, that's like your self-worth or your thighs, but whatever." And I'll tell you kind of how I broke that, but and then in realizing that like that was a direct link to me being uncomfortable in my sexuality. It's really
mhm.
hard to be like, yes, I'm a sexual like queen or royal being, but I don't like my body and I'm really uncomfortable
Right.
in my body. They don't really flow. They go kind of hand in hand in my opinion.
Mhm,
And so through some really intense work I was doing with this yoga teacher training, we had to like look at our limiting beliefs and I finally recognized that like my representation of my soul and the human that I am is not my body. Even
mhm.
though I had been taught that for so long in ballet, that like my worth is my body image and like what I look like versus my soul. And it's been years of unlearning and it's still a process that I'm working on. But through that, kind of my sexual awakening came hand in hand. And
Yes.
so when I started feeling more confident in my body and how to really feel into my pleasure and what I like versus what I think I should be doing. is quite expansive from there.
Oh my goodness. I love everything that you said. And we also talked about this off camera, Emily, you also started pole dancing recently. And
Mm,
when I started my journey in pole dancing, I feel like my journey in spirituality just skyrocketed. Like for some reason, well, you just explained it, right? The more we feel confident, like, and also sexuality. My sexuality has blossomed alongside with me, my
mm,
spirituality, my relationship with God. And it's funny, in the traditional like society, in my Instagram feed, it's all like pole dancing videos, and then I will have scriptures. I will have like quotes about God, and then like for people, they think that's like totally like opposing
mhm,
each other. Like, who are you to be what society would call like slutty or like
mhm,
sexual, or like the taboo, the not okayness of expressing my body in this way, and then like embracing and worshiping God at the same time. Like, so I am just completely dismantling that false idea, that false belief, like those two don't go together. They actually do, because the more I am dropping into my body, the more I am building this relationship between humanity and spirituality, like anchoring spirit into my body. And
mm,
it's been amazing. I feel like everything I've learned in my intellectual mind just dropped into my body. So now I'm fully embodying what it looks like to love myself, what it looks like to have
mm,
confidence, what it looks like to feel worthy, versus it's just something sitting in my mind. Like now I know it with my body. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's such an empowering feeling going kind of on the realm of sexual like uniqueness. It's such an empowering feeling that we when we decide that we get to write our own script and that we get to kind of redefine sexuality. That's something I'm definitely working on in my personal work and with clients is choosing your own definition of what sexuality looks like. For everyone
Mhm.
that's not going to be pole dancing, some people are like, no, not my comfort zone. But for us, that feels really empowering and sexy and fun,
Yeah.
and getting to decide what works for you is
Yeah.
super powerful.
Emily, do you have any like fun and exciting personal story to share around like rewriting your sexual narrative?
Yeah. I feel again, this is something I am still in the works and I will probably be in the works for the rest of my life. That's the joy of doing self work is that the journey is forever. Let me think of a fun story. Um,
Like anything that's totally outside the norm of what society tells you you should do, or like you gotta do what's
yeah.
the right thing to do.
Mm, yeah. I feel like is something that I'm totally navigating still. And this is from a place of me slowly redefining it is that I
Mhm.
am queer or sexually fluid. I am attracted to kind of the whole slew of genders.
Yeah.
And I've mostly been in heteronormative type relationships. And
Hmm.
my definition is that I can be queer, I can be sexually fluid, I can be whatever I want. And just because I might be in relationship with the opposite sex of me does not define my sexuality. Um,
Mm.
and it doesn't mean that I have not been with other genders, but typically in my more long-term relationships.
Hmm.
And and that's been a tricky and empowering thing to kind of define because it's something that even sometimes in the LGBTQ community there is some kind of pushback of like, oh well, you're not queer enough, or like there's a lot of kind of stereotype around bisexuality and things like that. So that's
Hmm.
been something I've been navigating for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I totally feel that the scary and the excitement that comes along with like going into veering off into unknowns, like you are paving out your own path of what works for you. And that comes down to
Mm,
like sexual uniqueness is not about trying to fit ourselves into what society has created for us, but it's
mm,
really feeling into this is what works for me, this is what feels right for me, and then like declaring it. It's like letting the world know, like, hey, this is who I get to be. This is what my sexuality get to be, and it can be scary as fuck. Like I'm just
no,
saying.
even saying it right now I'm like, ooh.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
acknowledging you, Emily, for sharing that. Like I can feel,
Mm,
how
yeah.
vulnerable this requires you to be, and and every time when we do take that step, like what you just did, like you just build up so much more courage and so much more like belief and confidence in
Yeah.
yourself, and also giving others the permission like to step out and declare that. So thank
Yeah.
you. I do have a fun story that I want to share. I think some of my
Please.
audience know about this, but it's also something that, just like you know, it's still, I'm teeter-totting like around the lines of feeling uncomfortable, feeling like should I really share this with my audience? But I've done a Facebook Live on this before. Essentially, last year in December, I did something that, you know, my culture, how I was raised and brought up in Asian culture, like it's something that I should never ever do. Like it's full of shame, it's full of taboo, like, you know, all of these beliefs that I was grew up thinking. But what I did was I flew out from Cali to New York and basically have a weekend of sex with this
Oh,
amazing man that I met
yay.
online, you know, like, well, we connected for over a year, and he was someone that I collaborated with on a project. But then like all of these ideas to meet someone I've never met in person and flew across the country and to have sex with this person that I never met, like all of these things are just like not what society would say it's okay to do.
Mhm.
And obviously I had to feel through so much of my own fear, so much of my own shame and guilt and judgment to take that leap forward. But girl, let me tell you, it was like so liberating, like such a liberating
Yeah.
weekend. And yeah, it's definitely a story to tell on my journey, on my path. And
Hmm.
it was definitely me like writing my own sexual narrative by taking that leap.
Yes. And I could see like this shift of being like the shame, like in your body, it was like the shame and the guilt. And then you were like, oh my gosh, when you actually like were able to just put that aside and tell it from your place of just like, it was so amazing.
Yeah.
And I like what you said earlier about kind of letting go of trying to fit into boxes and just feeling into what works for you. Because
Mhm.
like both of our stories, that might be super relatable for some people and not, but it's really important to just celebrate
Yes.
everyone's unique sexuality. Because Emily Nagoski in the book Come As You Are, she says there are as many sexualities are there as there are humans on earth. So
Mhm.
recognizing that it's going to look different for all of us and to just celebrate each other versus judging or shaming, because it's not going to make anyone feel good, including yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, Emily, let's talk about this. Why do you feel like, you know, and we personally on our journeys, we can probably speak into that. Why do you feel like people are so prone to judging or
Hmm.
like shutting people down, like feeling that we gotta police other people's sexuality? Why do you feel like we tend
Mm.
to do that?
This is a little like more like meta, like philosophy wise, but I think that sometimes I've noticed this in myself is that if something really like triggers me and I get really angry,
Mm-hmm.
it's typically a mirror. It's
Mm-hmm.
typically a mirror of I'm seeing something within me that I don't like in someone else.
Yeah.
So when maybe you share that story and someone's like, oh, how could you? It could be they've done that and they felt a ton of shame and they didn't celebrate themselves, or that's all they've wanted to
Yeah.
do, but they're not allowed to because of our society,
Mm-hmm.
or because of their society, they're like truly not allowed to. We have a lot more
Mm-hmm.
rights as women non-binary in our country, but
Mm-hmm.
um still not all of them. But I think I that's what I think a lot of times it is a mirror. Or I think it could just be the fear of the unknown, of never
Yeah.
having that experience and never feeling that they deserve to do what they want. I think that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times receiving from that partner that you flew out to be with and explore with, like allowing yourself to like really feel into pleasure, I think is so vulnerable. And I think it's actually very scary to experience pleasure
Mm-hmm.
to the degree that you want or are fantasizing about, because you're admitting to yourself that you are worthy and you deserve it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, absolutely. Yeah, like that weekend in New York, like, yeah, it was a declaration. Like, finally, for the very first time, I was no longer like being the one that pleases the other person. Like, even when I
Mm.
have sex, like, it was all about me receiving. Like, it was all about me. I was like the goddess. And it requires that self-worth, that confidence, like, hey, I deserve this. I'm worthy of receiving pleasure.
Mm.
And yes, it can be very scary. And I'm also resonating with everything that you said about anytime when we feel triggered, anytime when we feel the need to judge someone, that's us seeing a part of ourselves that we don't like, that we are rejecting, that we're not accepting, or that we yearn for, that we deeply
Mm.
desire. But it's that resentment of not being able to have that we feel the need to judge other people. Because I've been there, like, I 100% been there. And
Oh,
I
yes.
remember, like, before I start tapping into my sexual powers, like, I will always look at women like on Instagram or whatever, like women that are just so freaking confident in their bodies. They move in the ways that are like
Mm.
so sensual and sexual and just so beautiful and captivating to look at. But then there was a part of me that would judge them, like judge the heck out of them. Like, why are
Mm.
you being so like showing off so much skin, so much boobs, and like I would judge them so many different ways. But then I know that was a reflection of how much I've been imprisoned in my body, how much I wasn't able to
Mm.
express sexually. So as a way to feel better, I judge people.
Yeah.
And now I know. Now I see women embracing the sexual sexiness. Like, I just like, oh, you go, girl. Like, I'm celebrating them. And
Yes.
yeah, it's such a
It's how
massive
it's
shift.
yeah, it's how we really can learn from one another instead of stopping ourselves and putting up walls. We can learn from each other and really celebrate it. And I like that you said, kind of tying in the acceptance piece. I think that accepting ourselves as we are is like one of the hardest things, and it's even something I'm working on, accepting the fact that I've mostly been in hetero relationships and I'm sexually fluid, and knowing that I can be both and accepting that I'm doing both and am both is really empowering and really scary, because then it means I get to have everything that I want without feeling shame and guilt around it. So yes.
Oh my goodness. What you just
Yeah.
said right there, like, that's everything. It's not only in our sexuality, but life in general. Like,
Mm,
accepting us for exactly who we are.
yeah.
It's scary because that means we are going to receive everything that we want. Ooh,
Yes.
that's my
Yeah.
biggest takeaway from this conversation.
Yeah. And
Wow.
with the and I'm like obsessed with the book Come As You Are. We just read it.
Me too.
Yeah, and with with the parts, like seeing the parts of ourselves that we might not feel comfortable with and being triggered, I think that it goes along with that idea that we have to accept all parts of ourselves. When we're
Mhm.
just accepting the parts that like fit into the boxes that we've decided are acceptable and right or beautiful or correct or whatever, then we're actually missing out on a huge part of ourselves.
Yeah.
When we really allow ourselves to accept the parts that maybe don't fit any boxes ever, or look kind of dark, or are maybe angry or upset, we're actually missing out on being our whole selves. And I think that's something that's really hard to really comprehend a lot of the time, because we want to be this shiny perfect version of ourselves, but really when we embody all of it and we accept all the different parts, then we
Mhm.
become more ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are not meant to live in a box to begin with. So
Yeah. No.
we're really like, and the exciting thing, Emily, is like the time that we're living in right now is so much change happening in
Mhm.
humanity's consciousness. Like, I really feel like me and you, like what we're here to do with our clients, with the people that we work with, and also in our own personal journey, we are literally birthing a new role on this planet where we get to live with pleasure, we get to leave with our hearts, we get to leave with our spirits, and like playing and having
Yeah.
fun, and like no longer stuck in that cycle of struggle and grind, like
Mhm.
constantly being future oriented, goal oriented, but like so much living in the now moment, basking and savoring in this moment right here and right now. And I feel like I'm literally in that transition between the old paradigm and this new world that we're birthing. And this freaking like transition feels so scary. Like most days I feel scared because like there's nothing out there for me to like define it by, like for me to grab onto and like,
Mm.
you know, to fit in a box, as you would say.
Yeah.
It's scary, but you know what? Like it's worth it to me. It's so much more worth it than choosing to
Mm.
go back to old paradigm and settling for security. Um, yeah, that's where I'm
That was,
at right now.
yeah, that was one of the, I just finished a couple weeks ago with a client that I had through one of my programs, and one of her biggest takeaways is that she had just gotten really comfortable in that place of like fitting into the box. Even though that's not where she wanted to be, it became her comfort zone. And I think a lot of us can resonate with that. Just putting on the show, doing what we're supposed to be doing has become comfortable, but actually where we want to be is really uncomfortable. And through time, just like the other place that we were, this space will become more comfortable, or we'll just become more comfortable with the discomfort.
Yeah, yeah. And Emily, as we are wrapping all of this, like to summarize it all together, I think it's so powerful to see how much sexual uniqueness, radical acceptance, like this topic, how much it continuously weave into every other aspects of life. But then that
Mm-hmm.
goes to show why personally I am dedicating and devoting myself in liberating my sexuality, my body, my emotions. When we do this work, like what Layla was saying, when we go straight to the most taboo, most disempowered parts of ourselves and liberate us in this space, then we're also liberating ourselves in all other aspects of our life, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the core. Like once we understand how worthy we are, how much we deserve everything, then it also ripple out to
Yeah.
other aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The more we find it within ourselves, the more permission we give other people to do the same. And yeah.
Yes. Such an exciting time to live.
Yeah.
Emily, is there any last words you would like to share with the audience that would be
Hmm.
watching this, that may be tuning in right now?
Yeah, I would just say if there's one part of yourself that you're maybe kind of pushing aside or not looking at, maybe just take some time to sit with it and know that it's amazing and beautiful, and because it's a part of you, it's enough. Yeah.
I love it. All right. And I'm acknowledging anyone and everyone for tuning in today and
Yeah.
dedicating this 30 minutes to tune into something that gives you life, that maybe turns you on, that makes your pussy feel alive, whatever that is for you. Thanks for showing up for you. Thanks for dedicating this time as an act
Mm.
of self love. And then I'm so excited to see all of you back for another episode sometime tomorrow. And if you would like to be a guest on my show and have a conversation like what we just did together with Emily, I would love to have you. There's a
Mm.
link somewhere where you can apply. And until then, sending so much love your way, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.